Hi everyone, how are you today? Well, I am back on YouTube after a bit of a break. I have been ill for the last week, just a cold really, and before that we were away, and so I had some plans to do some book tags and reviews and things, but that just didn't happen, so that's the reason for the delay, and my voice will sound a little funny, but hopefully that won't be a problem for this video. I thought I would just give a quick update on my move to the UK, and talk about some new books and what I'm reading this autumn. I've been in the UK for a couple months now, and I'm always hesitant to talk about my personal life on my YouTube channel for many reasons, but I think one of them is just the fact that it's really hard to talk about things without seeming like humble bragging, or when you look at people's lives on the internet, you really get just one angle on them. Posts or videos can seem very idyllic and stress-free, and people just think you lived a charmed life because all they see is the flashy photos and hear like the positive stories. But yeah, I mean, moving countries has been a huge adjustment. I love living in the UK. I really do feel great about the move and feel like I'm in the right place, but there's been a learning curve, and people don't know the struggles of that. Especially because I don't want to, come across as complaining either, but I can say that, many tears have been shed, a lot of adjustments for me personally, some things very big and some things very silly. My husband has been incredibly supportive through all of this, both of my personal and professional life, and I'm so very grateful for him. Truly, apart from God, he's my rock, and it really is it's really been wonderful, being married and living with him and going through these experiences together. So that's been a really, bright spot in all this. And there's been other things too. Like I was lucky enough to meet Heather from Heather Reads not too long ago. She's a really friendly and cool person. And we had a wonderful long chat over tea about moving countries and, of course, reading in bookstores and things. So, altogether, it's been great. Again, lots of things I'm still adjusting to, things that, maybe aren't that glamorous, but it's going well. And on one of the brighter sides of things, we went to Scotland recently for our honeymoon. We almost didn't make it because we've both been having bouts of different infections and illnesses and things. But God was looking out for us and blessed us with some good health and relatively easy travel back and forth. So we spent the better part of a week there, and I've never been to Scotland before. There's some places where you have really high hopes for them, and sometimes they're overrated or overhyped, but Scotland was absolutely as amazing as it looks in the pictures and everything, and we just had a wonderful time. I loved the scenery, the beaches, the food. Growing up, one of my favorite novels was, and still is, Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson, and it was really cool to see portraits of Stevenson and J.M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan, at the Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh, and just kind of seeing glimpses and touches of Scottish literature on our trip. We also stopped by the Topping and Company bookstore, which has several locations throughout the UK, and including a couple in Scotland, and I just love this bookshop. It's certainly among my favorite bookshops I've ever been to. Right now at the top of the list. It's bright and cheerful. They have unbelievable variety and just the darlingest shelf ladders. I was even offered tea while I was browsing through, so that was fun. I just was so amazed at all the books they had. I mean, kind of like the niche of the niche books. And so I did end up getting a couple books. My sweet husband he got me the Ha Ha by Jennifer Dawson and the selected poems of Rainer Maria Rilke. And I'll talk about those in a moment. So that was a wonderful trip, truly a dream come true. And now I'm back and, getting on with the everyday things of life and just being both trying to obviously find a job, but also trying to appreciate this time I have where I'm not working and I can take time to read very deeply and broadly without any feelings of time pressure or mental load or whatever. So I'm going to go through some things I've been reading and what's on the horizon for the rest of this fall. I think I'm losing my voice a bit. Okay, so the first book I want to start with here is the one you can see. This is The Ha Ha by Jennifer Dawson with a glowing review by Claire Louise Bennett. Claire Louise Bennett, the author of Pond, which I have talked about before. Pond, it was one of my favorite novels from last year. So I had already planned to read this book, but obviously that recommendation was a nice touch. The Ha Ha is a weird and whimsical novel about a young woman who was studying at Oxford, and she has a bit of a mental breakdown and goes to live in a mental facility for a while. Now, we don't really see all of that in real time. She's actually at the point where they're trying to reintroduce her into society, so they find some light work for her to do, organizing a library of a local family at their house. And she spends a lot of time, obviously, organizing those books and just looking out the window, daydreaming, and she meets a young man from the men's facility, which is close by to the women's facility. And the Ha Ha in question is this little piece of the landscape at the institution where she lives, where she spends some time sitting in the poppies and talking to this young man. But the title of the book has a double meaning because our narrator's condition is such that she has hallucinations of animals, and they cause her to laugh at very inappropriate moments. Really, there's nothing wrong with her to the extent that she couldn't, in theory, live with society, but because her condition causes her to, laugh inappropriately or at the wrong times, she just doesn't fit into polite society of mid-century Britain. I really loved the first half of this book where it just felt like a slice of life through this narrator's eyes. Now, the author of this book, Jennifer Dawson, she herself was both a patient and a worker at a mental facility at, different times. And so she has this insider's perspective on both mental health issues and treatment during this time period. There's a really interesting afterword in this book as well, written by the author, which I do recommend reading. So actually the Mental Health Act was passed in 1959, and she wrote this book in 1960, and then it was published, I believe, the following year. But the Mental Health Act was, to quote Dawson, intended, among other things, to lead to a more liberal and open-door attitude towards mental illness and to reduce the stigma that people experience. Now, whether it was successful or not, I think she has some interesting comments on that, but altogether this book takes place before that happened and exposes just the way people were perceived and the difficulties they had. I think just feeling like human. And I think it's that part of the book that makes it so interesting, as well as her relationships with both the young man aforementioned and her mother. Now, the book takes a drastic tonal shift in the second act, which leads to some very dark plot twists that I was not honestly seeing coming. And I didn't really like that very much, but I think by the end of the book, it kind of made a lot of sense to me. The catalyst of the book is this major heartbreak in this woman's life, and it just really causes a lot of things to fall apart for her, but as well as lead her to seeking autonomy and change in her situation. I mean, this isn't really a spoiler. In fact, the book blurb teases that a possible path to freedom. I think I was expecting a bit more lightheartedness, though, in the second part of the book. There's no lightheartedness. It gets more and more dark as it goes on. But still very interesting. This was a 5-star read. I appreciated how nuanced it was, how much it had to say about women's roles in society without just being polemics. You know, it really was very nuanced and soul-searching. So, great book. Messy and sad, but definitely one of the best books I have read in a very long while. Okay, so that was a lot more than I intended to say about this book, but I do recommend it, just to be prepared for a bit of a roller coaster. So, the next book I want to talk about is actually not one I have here. It's an ebook called The Sorrow and the Glory by Timothy Tackett, and this is a brilliant biography of a Parisian lawyer named Colson, who witnessed and participated in the French Revolution. And this is based on over 1,000 letters that he wrote to his friend who lived in the countryside. Now, Tackett had written a much longer book about the Reign of Terror prior to this, but in the research for that, he discovered these man's letters and had enough material for a whole nother book. And, you know, sometimes I wonder with these things, is it just a cash grab? Like, is there really enough here to tell an interesting and full story? But it had really good reviews, and I'm happy to say I was not at all disappointed. In fact, I've been blown away by this book. It's been honestly a page turner, and, you know, nonfiction can be kind of hit and miss, but I do love a good biography, and this one is just riveting. Colson, this lawyer, was a devout Catholic, and he was also devoted to his aristocratic patrons and the king himself. So how did this man, who we might even say was a conservative of sorts, how did he become a revolutionary, and a very active one at that? So this book covers, obviously, his origins, his family life, his career, and then what led him to that shift, and all based on his letters. So, you know, it is based on letters, these primary sources where, you know, there's as much maybe information as misinformation being passed around, but I think what makes that so very interesting is this is what this man's perspective was. This is the information he had, and I feel like it's very relatable right now to be reading about someone who was, you know, fairly educated, but still, you know, as everyone was back then, and as we are now, we're limited in what information we have, and we have to make decisions of conscience and you know, a lot of important life decisions based on limited information. So I think that's one of the things that makes it so fascinating. His letters reveal the psychological and physical turmoil of Parisians. He covers, you know, the bread shortages and you know, the actual impact that had on people's health, not to mention their mental health as well. There were sweeping fears and feelings of betrayal in the city among the commoners. You know, we sometimes, thinking about the French Revolution, have this very simplified picture of, you know, an angry, dirty mob with pitchforks or whatever, but, you know, that's far from the complete picture. Lawyers like Colson and even some clergymen were taking part in these demonstrations, so it was quite a range of people with very different backgrounds, and, you know, again, even people like Constant, who were extremely loyal to the king, experienced a shift in this time. And I just think that's been so interesting. I'm heading into the second half of the book soon, so we'll see how this progresses. But really, really good book so far. Very much worth the £4 or whatever it was to get the ebook. I guess the next thing I'll talk about was one of those books I got from Topping Bookstore. So this is the selected poems of Rilke, who was a prolific German poet from the early 1900s. He would have been a contemporary of Franz Kafka and James Joyce and Virginia Woolf and many other celebrated authors in that time period. And so this book is pretty great. It covers an extensive selection of his work, drawing from some of his most famous collections, and there's some collections that are actually complete in here. So what I'm reading right now, it's called the Duino Elegies, and they were written when he was staying at Duino Castle in Italy. I think it's called Duino Castle. So this is coming from what's considered his peak writing period. He has like 3 or 4 different writing periods, and so that's where this originates from. I have 3 bookmarks in this book. I have the introduction, which I think I need to finish reading because, boy, I need all the context I can get for this. I have a bookmark for the endnotes, which are also incredibly important, and then I have, obviously, my place marked in the actual elegies. I've just been reading this very slowly, one elegy at a time. Rilke's poetry is incredibly beautiful. It's very complex, not in terms of the language used per se, but just the way he thinks and is conveying his ideas. He has his own taxonomy, I would say, his own way of describing the spiritual and philosophical concepts he's writing about. So, for example, you'll read about angels and lovers in these poems, but if you're actually reading through the endnotes, you'll find out that he was actually referring to other concepts that angels and lovers represent. So, that's making this a bit complicated, and I do love the endnotes, but flipping back and forth has been a bit tedious. So this is one of those situations where sometimes I just read the endnotes first and then go read the poem, as silly as that sounds. There's even some glimmerings of Walt Whitman in here, but it'd be overly simplistic to make a direct comparison, because again, I think Rilke's going into some really heavy spiritual, metaphysical stuff here that's difficult to pin down, let alone compare to Whitman. I'm really enjoying just the sheer beauty of the language, and I think as it goes on it'll be easier to understand. At least that's my hope. Another book on my fall reading list, which I have not started yet, is The Ice Palace by Tarje Viesos. I don't know if I said his name quite right, but I listened to it a few times earlier. This book is, it crossed my radar a while ago, maybe a year or 2 ago, and I've been wanting to read this since I read Ice by Anna Kavan last year. They're both obviously using ice in their stories in a heavily metaphorical way. At least that's my understanding. And I wanted to compare this book with that one. They're also both books about obsession. This book is about the friendship of these 2 girls and one's obsession with the other. And I just find stories about obsession to be quite interesting, whether they're romantic or not. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. I'm not sure if I'll like it or not, but it's highly rated. He's considered one of the foremost Norwegian authors as well, so excited to read this. Alright, so a few more books I'm excited to read in the near future. I don't have this one either, but it's The Toilers of the Sea by Victor Hugo. And an online book club I'm part of is starting this month. It's a very long book. I don't know how far I will manage to get in it, but it is a sea story. There's even a sea monster in it, and I've not read anything by Hugo before. He's a huge gap in my reading, so this could be quite interesting. Another book I want to read is On the Incarnation by Saint Athanasius. This is a little book I've had for a while from the popular patristic series. I think it was Gavin Ortland on Truth Unites who first alerted me to this series. Lots of church father writings published in these little booklet forms. So I have not really read a lot of church fathers. I should say I've barely read any at all. Just a few excerpts here and there. So I would like to read this. And I'm still reading poems by Christina Rossetti. I did read Goblin Market a while ago. I thought it was really good. I don't feel like I had much to say about it, but it was a striking poem, and I think well worth its hype, its reputation. So yeah, that's Goblin Market and Other Poems by Christina Rossetti. And this one has such wonderful illustrations as well. So that's my reading, and that's my slice of life as of late. I hope you all are doing well. I'm going to try to get back into regular videos now that I'm feeling a little better. I have a few tags to catch up on soon, so maybe this Friday I'll do a tag video and I'll let you know how the Ice Palace goes, amongst other things. So thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.